Hello and welcome to Science Speed Dating. I'm your host, Eric Heisserer, screenwriter of Arrival and writer of the comic book Secret Weapons. If you have opinions about either of those and want to see me face-to-face, I am currently up for auction at charitybuzz.com. So go over there and bid, and if you win, then I'll take us to lunch, and you can criticize my moderation of this event for an hour if you like. So let's talk about Science Speed Dating. This is made possible by the Science and Entertainment Exchange, which is a program for the National Academy of Sciences. I would not try to say that fast. The way this goes is each of these six geniuses here with me have exactly 4 minutes to blow your mind with science. And then after that, we will open up to general questions, and then we'll be off to the races, and maybe Mario Kart races. So let's start this with our first speaker, Clifford V. Johnson, professor of astronomy and physics, was it?
Physics. USC.
USC. All right. Your 4 minutes start now, Clifford.
Well, hi. I thought it would be fun to give you 10 things that you should know about black holes. So you should maybe take that to the pub and impress your friends in conversations. So you hear about black holes a lot, but what are they, and when did they come about? First of all, they weren't invented by Stephen Hawking, as people often say. They actually were invented or discovered. The idea came a lot earlier. Actually, in the 19th century, a teacher called John Mitchell, had the idea. He was thinking about the fact that, as had been recently discovered, light travels at a finite speed. And he thought, what if the escape velocity, how fast you need to get a rocket off a planet or something, what if that escape velocity was the speed of light? Then it wouldn't be able to escape, and you would have what he thought of as what he called a black or dark star. The term black hole came later. So that's the context. It's an old idea, but then it actually made a lot of sense much later on. By about 1915, Albert Einstein had helped us figure out what gravity really was, and it was the fabric of space and time itself is this sort of flexible thing that can change and stretch, and all of those ideas you heard about warp drive and what have you are inspired by that sort of idea, the shape of space and time changing. It turns out that within a few months of Einstein writing down his final equations, which are really, really difficult equations to solve, in the trenches in World War I, in his spare time, a young guy called Karl Schwarzschild actually figured out the first non-trivial solution of Einstein's equations. Turns out that the Schwarzschild solution, is the thing that eventually we recognized as also describing a black hole. So that was 1916. So then you go a little bit further, and what's going on? Well, people are going, well, yeah, is it just some crazy solution that isn't real? Is this really physics? It's so extreme. It's so crazy, this object, that people took a long time to actually appreciate whether it really existed. Turns out nature really makes them. We now know that. People realized actually that stars, like our sun, or actually a little bit bigger than our sun, and anything much bigger than that, eventually they run out of the fuel that they burn in order to stay actually these big bright objects that we know. They run out of that fuel, and then there's a lot of stuff left over that then collapses under gravity and becomes so compressed that the escape velocity is the speed of light, and a black hole forms. Turns out black holes are showing up everywhere in the universe now, whereas we're understanding astrophysics. The center of nearly every galaxy has a supermassive black hole, hundreds of millions of times the mass of our sun. Those may be not just decoration, they may be crucial to how galaxies form, how they evolve. So we're learning so much about the fate of our universe, and everything in it is governed by the influence of black holes in interesting ways. Most recently, you may have heard in the news about colliding black holes. There's an experiment called LIGO, where you receive gravitational waves, which are ripples in that flexible space and time that Einstein discovered, ripples coming out from the explosion created by two black holes colliding. So that's another amazing place we're beginning to see that black holes are everywhere we look in various interesting ways, crucial to how astrophysics works. And finally, actually, as Hawking discovered, black holes actually aren't black. When you start mixing them with quantum physics, we're learning so much about how much changes when you add that. It turns out that black holes leak out radiation due to quantum effects in a very interesting way. And the whole field of quantum gravity, which is what I work on, uses that and many more things to explore how black holes really work.
Wow, Clifford, you're right there under the wire. I don't think you could be that more accurate if you were in a black hole. Next up is a director for analytical development at a pharmaceutical company. It's Jamie Mark.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here today. I'm going to talk to you about the medical field. And we have an image on the screen with me today, I think, for my topic, for your enjoyment. But what I really want to start with is I hope they get all the cancer out. And, this is really what every patient says when they finish their surgery to remove their cancer. And so I'm going to talk about this cancer detecting pen, and it's called the Spec Pen. And it was invented by a group at the University of Texas at Austin. And I'm really excited about it. This is the future of healthcare to me. And this cancer detecting pen can help with tumor removal while the patient is on the operating table. And it can help the surgeon make decisions in seconds, in real time, during the surgery. And so thinking of how common cancer is, this pen has the ability to affect millions of people's lives. And so it's been in the news, maybe you guys have seen it, but what's the current problem that this pen is trying to solve? It's that cancer patients, like we said, they undergo a surgical treatment to remove their tumors. The surgeon will attempt to remove all of the cancerous tissue while leaving as much of the healthy tissue behind. You remove not enough tissue, the patient is back for surgery. Again, it's more anesthesia, cost, time, pain recovery. If you remove too much, you may end up with more disfiguring aesthetics with what's remaining behind. So this is just a really important area. And so to assess currently how much tumor to remove by the surgeon, they take tissue slices. You remove slices from the body or pieces of tissue, and they send them off to a separate lab frozen, and they analyze them there. Meanwhile, the patient is left on the operating table for 30 minutes or more open while these samples are analyzed and decisions are made. And a lot of times the result is not all of the tumor is removed. So this is why this is just really exciting. So the solution to this problem, this mass spec pen, it works like a barcode reader for cancer. So they will take this pen and actually touch it to the open patient in the operating room. It's non-destructive. You just hold the tip up to the tumor, and it will actually read the sort of biomarker unique profile of that tumor, and the software will read out cancer, you should take more out, or healthy cells, you can stop here and move on and test the next area. So it really helps with looking at the margins of the tumors. In the image that you guys are sharing with me, you're seeing a tumor that is removed from the body in the lab. It can be used for that traditional laboratory use as well, but the really exciting discovery is to use it in real time in surgery. So how does this pen work? As you can see, it's a handheld device. It has a disposable biocompatible tip, and when you hold it to the tumor, it releases a water droplet onto that tumor. The water droplet sits there for 3 seconds, and it's able to actually extract some of those proteins and fats and things on the surface of the tumor, and then it carries that water molecule through the tube and to this very sophisticated mass spectrometer that will give you this unique readout. So that gives that immediate cancer, no cancer readout. It's really super cool. So at the end of the day, the result is hopefully the patient can finish their surgery and say, I'm cancer-free, and just have a really good outcome. So this pen is currently being used in human clinical trials this year. So keep a watch out for it. We all hope it gets approved and really helps make our lives better. So thank you very much.
Wow. All right. We've gone from black holes to cancer-sniffing pens. And next up, we'll be speaking with a software engineer at Google. Let's meet Anthony Mays.
Hey there. How's it going? My name is Anthony D. Mays, software engineer on the data visualization team at Google. I've been working there for 4 years, and I've loved every minute of it. I work on a group called the Data Infrastructure and Analysis team, and one of the things that we're responsible for is building software systems that manage petabytes of information. And one of the great things about thinking about that is it's sort of hard to conceptualize what a petabyte is until you realize that a terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes, roughly, like 1,024 gigabytes. And an exabyte is 1,000 terabytes. So that's a lot of information going back and forth. And I love how at Google I get to work with these systems that are moving data all over the world, with data centers all over the place and just doing amazing things. And one of the things that I get to do is I get to help organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful by building data visualizations. I specifically work on web front ends in JavaScript and a number of other languages, and I've worked with about 30 different programming languages in my very short lifetime. And so I've really enjoyed the process of just problem solving and like fixing bugs and adding new features. Some of the work that I've had the opportunity to work on has appeared in a lot of popular Google products like Google Analytics, for instance, or Google AdWords. So the stuff that helps you understand, like if you're running a website, what kind of traffic are you getting? What kind of people are you seeing? How can you add features to your website to make it better? So I get to help add visualizations that help our internal stakeholders really tell the story about what's happening with data and make decisions off of that. One of the interesting things about myself and my story and getting to Google is that I never thought that I could actually work at a place like Google. I never thought that I could become a software engineer, and that's because I grew up in a place called Compton, which some of you out there may know. I'm straight out of Compton. I moved there when I was 4 years old, 1988, or 1987, I should say. And the very next year, a kindergarten teacher found that I had been physically abused. And so I ended up getting into foster care in Compton. And it was a really rough time growing up. But one of the things that I learned when I was 8 years old is how to program. And I taught myself how to code using the basic programming language when I was 8. And that was a pretty amazing thing because for me, I wanted to just build my own Bat computer. I was a huge Batman fan. And I'm not just saying that because I'm at Comic-Con, but I've always loved Batman. And I wanted to have my own Bat computer. So I taught myself how to program and built my own Bat computer. Let's be clear, it was crappy, but it was still mine. And one of the great promises of working in computer science is that in computer science is that you can build things with your own hands, right? You can conceptualize something and then in many respects bring that to reality using code. And that's one of the things that I hope to share with the next generation of technologists. When I go back to Compton now, there's this robust STEM program and tons of kids that are learning Python and learning languages that I hadn't had the opportunity to learn when I was growing up. And being able to see all of the diversity of people that come from diverse backgrounds from all over the world and getting the chance to work with them is just an amazing thing. And it's not something that you need a lot of money to get involved in either. Many people have multiple computers at home, have multiple phones, and you can learn how to code today and start building things today and putting that stuff out into the whole world. And so I love being a software engineer. I love being able to work at Google and helping to further their mission of organizing the world's information. Just a cool job. And so if it's something that you're ever thinking about, I'm sure that there are some of my panelists here today that know how to code, and it's just one of those cool things that I think that if you're into it, you should try it out. It's great problem solving.
All right, that's halfway through our list of geniuses. Next up is astronomer Phil Plait.
For all of human history, up until 1781, you could count all the known planets in the entire universe on two hands: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Then we discovered Uranus, and in 1846, Neptune was discovered. But even then, up until the 1990s, you could still count all the known planets in the entire universe on two hands. 8. 9? Say 8. Now, this wasn't for lack of looking. Astronomers had looked for other planets, and we tried to look for planets around other stars. That's really hard because planets are faint and stars are really bright. But that all changed in 1992. We found two planets orbiting a pulsar. Now, given that a pulsar is the compressed remains of a star that exploded in a supernova, this came as a bit of a surprise. And it turns out that there had been a lot of false starts, a lot of claims of planets that had been made for a long time. They'd always turned out to be wrong, but these planets were real. And once we knew we were out there, we started coming up with a lot of clever techniques to find them. And talking about the reflex method, the transit method, direct imaging, gravitational lensing, and I can't go into details about that because this is science speed dating, not science long-term relationship, and I don't have that kind of time. But gravitational lensing, it's really cool. But no, I'm not going to talk about that. A first date should leave some mystery. But now we have whole observatories dedicated to looking for these planets, orbiting observatories, and all they do is look at other stars and trying to find these other planets. And they work. We have 3,000 known confirmed exoplanets, planets orbiting alien stars. This is enough to start categorizing them, to understand how they behave, even how they form. And the goal, and don't let astronomers lie to you, that there are a lot of different goals, but this is the goal, is to find another Earth. Now, we know that there are other worlds in our solar system that might be able to support light. There are these icy moons orbiting Jupiter and Saturn, and underneath them they have liquid water oceans, and the conditions there are okay for life. We don't know if they have life, but maybe. And there's Saturn's moon Titan. And this is really cold place. It is so cold that water is frozen harder than granite there. But there's liquid methane on the surface, and that, it turns out, might be able to support life as well. But these are alien worlds. They don't remind us of Earth. And so we're looking for another Earth. These other worlds don't look like home. There's something about a warm, watery, blue-green planet that just calls to us, and we're very, very close to finding that. That's why I love this field of exoplanetary astronomy. We've spent all this time on Earth, all of humanity, trying to answer a question: is, are we alone? And exoplanetary science is a big step in answering that question.
All right, Phil, with a minute to spare.
Wow, I've
We'll get
never
back
come
to you
in under
soon.
deadline. That's amazing.
Can I have that minute?
We're gonna switch over now from astronomy to economics, and joining us here is Allison Sanchez.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allison, and I'm an economist. I have to admit I was a little nervous today when I was asked to come on the panel and talk about economics, because for a lot of people, it's not a very glamorous field. I don't get to cure cancer on a daily basis. I don't get to find new planets. But what I do get to do is ask questions about the world around me. And that's really what economics is about, asking questions about humanity itself. So as economics has grown as a field, we've gone from concepts like supply and demand and production costs and interest rates to really neat questions like, does artificial intelligence have the capacity to make us happier as workers, as human beings? So as the economy evolves, as humanity evolves, so does the field of economics. So some of the new questions being asked in economics revolve around things like rapid technological change. So I mentioned artificial intelligence. This is a new field for science, but it's also a new field for economists. Economists are very interested in seeing how artificial intelligence not only affects the workforce, but it affects things like people's happiness. Are you happier because you have a smartphone? Are you happier because you can have something tell you to turn your lights on and off to save you energy in your home? Things like that. Those are really neat questions that I think 5-10 years ago economists didn't get to ask because the technology hadn't evolved to that point. So we rely on other scientists to innovate and do things, and then we go and kind of study what they've done. Innovation is a new field for economics because as we evolve as human beings, as we evolve as scientists, technology is evolving incredibly rapidly. So we like to study how people innovate. Why is it that some countries are more innovative than others? Why do some inventions take off while others you never hear about again? So those are questions economists ask. Other questions regarding humanity, things like altruism. I myself am somebody who studies altruism, which was newer for the field of economics, because economists like to believe, or had believed for a long time, that people were basically selfish. So when we find that people are altruistic, we try to find out why people are altruistic. So what makes somebody nice? How does somebody switch from being selfish to making an altruistic decision? And how can we get people to be nicer to one another and make more of those altruistic decisions? So that's something that I personally study, and it's a growing field within economics. Another thing that we're studying is inequality. Inequality is increasing over the years. It was on the decline, and now it has increased according to some of the metrics. So we want to find out, what are the sources of inequality? Why is it that there is a growing population of have-nots in the world, and figure out how we can get more balance? Another thing, talking about technology, has technology and the rapid increase in technology, has that contributed to inequality in any meaningful way? And how can we get people to be more of a level playing field? So those are some of the really interesting questions. Economics is not a glamour field. We're at Comic-Con, and I don't think there's going to be an economist in the next Marvel film, although I'd love to see an econo girl or maybe a wonder economist out there. So Marvel, if you're listening, show econ some love.
Fantastic. All right, last on our list here, the genius right next to me here is Bobby Williams, the Senior Research Manager at Corteva, to tell us about agriculture.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and this is a lot of fun. I'm really actually enjoying the panel as a viewer, not a participant. So I'm a plant scientist at Corteva Agriscience, which is one of the major agricultural companies in the U.S. and worldwide. And I'm going to talk a bit today about CRISPR and its uses and applications in agriculture. And so CRISPR, you probably heard of before. It stands, here's my technical bit, clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. CRISPR. And what CRISPR is it's a method, it's a molecular method where you can go into the nucleus of a cell, you can scan the genome of all the sequences, all the DNA sequences, you can find specific sequences, and then you can go in and edit them. So it's like little scissors that go in, cut, and then you can insert or delete a base, and you can change genes that already exist within an organism. So, what does CRISPR allow us to do? Well, I want to explain it by putting it a little in context by doing a little compare and contrast with traditional breeding. So in the 10,000 years of agriculture prior to the discovery of CRISPR, crops were domesticated and improved by selective breeding. And so that was basically, it's a random process where if you're a breeder, you go and you find a plant that has the characteristic that you like, it's bigger, yields more, what have you. And you go, okay, I want to identify that plant. Then you find another one and that has other traits that you like, and then you cross them, and then you sort through the offspring looking for those that have hopefully both traits. Now, this becomes a huge numbers game really quickly because plants have tens of thousands of genes, and each of those genes can exist in multiple different states. So in order to shuffle that deck, if you can think of it as shuffling a deck, and you have millions of permutations you can generate, and you have to sort through all those to find those that are better, or at least a shuffled deck that gives you a hand that suits better what you had before. Now, I will put this in the context. Here's my prop. Breeding has been, though, extremely successful. So here's just a couple things that are broccoli, cauliflower, kale. What else we got? Cabbage. And I know I'm hungry now. And these are actually derived from the same species. It's Brassica oleracea. And so this was the result of breeders going out and selectively breeding for these different traits, these different forms. And as a result now, from agriculture, we have a variety of plants that have different tastes, different nutritional content, better environmental adaptations. Okay, so what does CRISPR do? Well, it essentially allows us to do, in a sense, what breeders have been doing, but much, much faster. And so you can think about it, if breeding is, like I said, that random process, CRISPR allows you to turn that process into essentially a non-random sort of focused directional process. Meaning rather than shuffling the deck and having to look for a hand that's better, you can actually design the hand that you think is better, or at least better than the one that you currently have. And so this, how is this being used? Well, you can improve plants in many ways. You can make them more hardy to the environment, climate change, better utilizers of nutrients. But one example, I'm going to give you one example that's close to my heart, my vegetarian heart, which is you can think about increasing the protein content of plants. As we know, as populations grow, as people become more middle class, the demand for protein is getting increasingly high. Meat, of course, is the main source of protein. But meat is also land intensive. You have to grow the crops to feed the livestock as well as have the livestock itself. So you can think of examples where maybe we have crops that make better quality and quantity of plant source proteins, and so that would both make me happier as a vegetarian. Protein would certainly make my pork chop loving wife happier. She can get her pork better and more efficiently and less environmental footprint. So I want to wrap it up there by saying thank you, and then maybe on your next speed first date, you'll go to dinner and you'll have a salad that's got a higher protein content because of CRISPR. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, I have lots of questions for all of you, and we have very little time. So let's see if I can go down the list. Clifford, you very briefly talked about that black holes aren't actually black, that there's actually color in them. So I want to follow up on that. Like, what color are they? And are they all the same color, or is it bespoke to each black hole? And how do we get a visual model of this at some point?
Well, what you actually see, and this was Hawking's amazing discovery, which in the early 70s, which is that when you put together what we know about quantum physics with this sort of one-way door, which is this point of no return that classical physics tells you, they don't play together well, and quantum physics wins, and it says actually. It's going to look as though the black hole is radiating stuff. And it actually looks like it's a warm body that has a temperature associated with it. So the answer to your question is that different black holes have different temperatures depending upon how massive they are. And the temperature is tied to how much stuff made them up. And so you get a range of different temperatures of different black holes. I should say that the actual temperature for the black holes that we see in ordinary astrophysics is really, really, really tiny. It's so much lower temperature than the actual temperature that is of the whole universe itself, that it's not actually, from the point of view, you're not going to warm your home using a black hole anytime soon.
No, it's not going to replace solar radiation. Nothing.
No, no.
All right. Okay, that's sad. I'll have to cancel that order. Jamie, I think the number one question for people who see this pin, especially if they know someone or are dealing with cancer themselves, is what's the process that has to go through in order to get out on the market? Like, how soon can we see people, our own doctors, using this?
Yeah, great question. So right now there's a paper published on the studies they've done on this pen so far. And in that paper, they were able to do a live operation on a mouse. And they were able to do a lot of human samples like you see in our image. And so in 2018, they're doing the human clinical trials. And so then there's a process of doing a series of clinical trials. And with FDA review, of course, keeps us all happy and healthy. That's our oversight here in the US. So I would say probably a couple of years is about how far off it could be, which is not far away.
That's not bad. And is this something that it's a follow-up question. Do you think there are other fields outside of cancer? I know there's a number of other ailments that require exploratory surgery that require people they have to be opened up more than once. Do you think that this kind of technology will provide inspiration for other options?
Yeah, I could definitely see this being applied to other things because it's really about being able to tell the difference between more than one sort of biomarker profile. So as long as there's a way to tell apart whatever it is that they're looking for in surgery, you could absolutely, write another software program. We'll call up Anthony.
Right, call me, I'll do it.
Nice. All right, well, Anthony, I got to say, data visualization is one of my favorite things, especially the interactivity of data visualization, because I sort of got blown away by this little app called Foldit, which was essentially just that, an interactive data visualization tool that they put out free that was actually by a research group that was trying desperately to find a cure for a specific type of AIDS. And they knew that because they had to interact with this data, this massive amount of data, it would take them around 5 to 7 years to find a cure. And so they thought, we'll crowdsource this and let everybody try and participate, make it as a game. And a team of people online solved it in 2 weeks. So what is your most interesting example of data visualization that you've done at Google?
Oh wow, that's a really tough one. I wish I would.
You're on the spot.
Yeah, well, me personally, I'm sort of partial to sunburst charts. Personally, like if you ask me what's my favorite kind of chart, I like sunburst charts. Well, actually, no. Let me back it up even more than that. I am the table expert at Google, so I work on table charts, and table charts don't always get a good rap, right? They present a lot of very detailed information, but you can do so much with it in terms of flipping things around. So there's tables, but then I also love sunburst charts too, because you can sort of play around with the rings and figure out like the percentage of composition of things as you're exploring it. So, I think I've seen some very interesting sunbursts, and they just look really cool, especially when you get the color scale there, and it's just a really exciting visualization, and one that I find that I like to play with the most out of all the kinds I get to develop.
Wow. All right. Tables.
Hey, tables they're the stuff, man. I'm telling you.
So I can figure that out real quick. All right, Phil, I can't look at you, but I know you're there. You'd mentioned to me that you're now able to see atmospheres of exoplanets or planets through various telescopic means. Tell me how that's possible.
Well, I was going to save that for the second date. Keep that callback going. But in fact, yeah, one of the methods we have for determining that other planets exist is they pass between the star, their host star, and us. And they block a little bit of that starlight. That's what I had mentioned before called the transit method. Well, it turns out that not only can you learn about things like the planet's size, its orbit, and all kinds of things that way, if the planet has an atmosphere, the star's light has to pass through that atmosphere to get to us. Now, if that atmosphere has hydrogen, oxygen, methane, nitrogen, whatever in it, those molecules pluck out individual colors of light. And we can see that. We can look at the star when the planet's not in front of it, then look at the star when the planet is in front of it, look at the differences and say, oh, there's a little bit less light coming at this particular color. That means that planet's atmosphere has nitrogen in it. And so this is incredible to me that you have a planet that could be hundreds or thousands of trillions of kilometers away, and yet we can see what's in its atmosphere simply by looking at what's not in the light that we find.
Wow, dang, okay. Let's see if I have just a few more minutes here, so let's get to the last two people. Allison?
Yes.
I'm having trouble sleeping. Please tell me you have some ideas on how to fix this.
Well, you could listen to an economist give a talk. That's the major cure for insomnia that I know about.
All right. But beyond that, do you think that you're seeing economic trends that are mainly generational when you talk about the difference between more self-centered economic ideas versus altruism?
I don't think you could say it's generational. I think it's there's a lot of heterogeneity, meaning there's a lot of variety in humans. So I think you see certain other trends that are generational about how they define reciprocity or when you should be reciprocal to someone else or when someone is deserving of help. So the social norms change over time, but the basic tendency to be altruistic is really static across the generations, in my humble opinion.
All right. So that's not something we can blame the old people for.
Or the millennials.
Or the millennials, right? I hate that. All right, then Bobby, tell me, please God, tell me that we can save our planet somehow through CRISPR. Like the climate change won't kill us.
Right. No. Okay. Very good question. Yes, absolutely. It's going to. I don't know if it's going to be the single cure, but it absolutely will a part of the solution. So climate change, for example. So we know that there is increasing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, and for example, and then carbon dioxide is actually one of the sources of food for plants. Their leaves actually use light and absorb carbon dioxide, turn it into sugars, and for example, we do not know exactly what the effects of that increased carbon dioxide levels are going to be on plants. There are academic labs that are studying it. They're doing really cool experiments for actually growing plants where they're mimicking the conditions that our atmosphere will be in 50 or 100 years out. What are the temperature changes? What are the carbon dioxide changes? And then trying to understand what effect does that have on the plants? How do they respond? So that's definitely one way. And once we know how plants respond and then what negative effects we need to mitigate, then CRISPR could absolutely be a way to go in and make those changes. Conversely, as the environment changes, we're also going to have a slight change in maybe where certain plants are grown. As it gets warmer and drier, plants are maybe a little bit more adapted for those warmer, drier climates, like say down in Texas, those we might get grown a little bit further north. Or conversely, as I said in the first half, or we take the crops that are already grown in certain locations, and based on our understanding of plants that grow in these harsher conditions, can we modify the ones so that they can adapt to a changing environment? So absolutely part of the problem, or part of the solution. Right.
Excellent. All right. I think we have just a little bit more time here, and so I'm going to have a final round of speed questions for our speed daters here, and that would be you give us something that you're most looking forward to as your next big thing, your next big whale to conquer. It can be an acronym, it can be a code word, it can be a new kind of black hole. We'll start with you, Bobby, because we're going to go backwards.
We're going to go backwards. Okay, no pressure. I think that CRISPR is such a new technology. It's only been around for about the last 5 or 6 years. So the big question is, I don't think we yet fully understand what are the opportunities and what are the applications. So simply put, and it's not a dodge, but I don't think we yet can fully grasp the potential and what we will be able to do with CRISPR in the coming years.
So your answer is I don't know.
I don't. It was a very sophisticated technical. I don't know.
Of course. Allison?
I think I'm most looking forward to finding out how to make people nicer to one another. How do you make someone go from making a really selfish decision to being kind to somebody else? I think that's really the forefront of, if economics could solve anything or do anything for humanity, I think that's one contribution that I think we could make, is how to get people to be nice.
You're hired.
Thanks.
Bill?
I think it's actually what I was talking about earlier. It's that I think it's finding another Earth. We find this amazing variety of planets, hot, cold, big, small, different things in our atmospheres, orbiting binary stars and all kinds of different stars. But we haven't found an Earth-sized planet with about the same mass as Earth orbiting another star with about the same temperature as Earth. We found some close ones. And we've even found some things that kind of look like that. But do they have oxygen in their atmosphere? Can they support life? And I think that's the kind of thing. When we find that next Earth, that's going to be a big deal.
Anthony?
So I want to use machine learning to teach a computer how to tell me what's interesting on a chart. So instead of having to crowdsource that out, I want the computer to tell me, hey, you should pay attention to this bar or this point or this line or whatever, and figure it out for me.
All righty. Jamie?
So what's dating without talking about hooking up and babies? So to build on Bobby's comment, he sort of alluded to the wide variety of things you can use CRISPR for. So I'm going to throw out designer babies to be controversial. So certainly you can use CRISPR for human gene editing to fix genetic diseases or genetic tumors. For example, some cancers are genetic mutations. We had a nice chat about that at lunch. So I'm going to go with designer babies.
I'm writing the sci-fi film about this now. Clifford, top us off.
So, yeah, you might wonder what all this stuff about black holes is good for. It's kind of cool, but, who cares? But at the end of the day, especially this quantum stuff combined with black holes is the key to understanding how our universe itself came to be. Just all of that beginning at that very earliest moment, 13.8 billion years ago. That's gravity tied up with the quantum in ways we're trying to understand. So black holes, understanding them, is helping us learn how to answer those questions, the origin of time, space, and all of us and everything in the universe. So that's where it's pointing.
Well, and on the start of the universe is where we end up. Thanks all. This is Science Speed Dating.